I Do by Freedom Berry, Part 3, The Product, and Ever Shall Be. The Levels. The following diagram is intended to indicate the fourfold aspects of the being which I have endeavored in this book to reveal as the only reality. A careful study of the chart will show this one being as necessarily all-inclusive, encompassing both extremities of its awareness. At the surface level, you will see that all appearances of a physical nature are a literal interpretation. Interpretation of what? Probe beneath the surface and you will discover a change of nature. Here in this relative shallow level, you discover the mental concepts, which are the psychological equivalents of the physical appearances. But psychological activity is still an interpreting. There is nothing causative here. These mental concepts constitute the alphabet of conceivable possibilities. What can activate them? Keep probing. Moral sense arouses an emotional response. On this level, there is definite stirring of sensation. Even here, we have not reached creativity. We have a vivid impression, but of what? When we can deepen sensation to conviction, we have reached a spiritual depth which is causal. At last, here is the essence, or feeling of actually being, that which we began tracing from its appearance, through its concept, through its sensation, until we reach its substance. This diagram is as useful diagnosing the nature of unsatisfactory conditions as it is for projecting satisfactory solutions for these conditions. It will be noted that the last sentence did not read, diagnosing the cause of, for the cause of any appearance is always the same, whether the appearance be lovely or ugly. Every condition appears because the individual to whom it appears is consenting to its actuality in the spiritual depth of his being. Even if that condition is not to his liking, he knows it is there. He feels it is true. All his senses testify to its existence, and the impersonal law of cause and effect obligingly projects the visible appearance to him that hath the feeling of its actuality. While these levels in the diagram appear to be separated into distinct layers, my intention is not to convey one substance, if I may call it that, with no layers, but gradations or degrees of deepness of itself. These four levels of interpreting represent the four quarters of the human soul. In The Marriage of Heaven and Hell, Blake advises that the notion that man has a body distinct from his soul is to be expunged, and he blatantly insists that this will come to pass by an improvement of sensual enjoyment. Note carefully that Blake does not suggest either a blank denial or a dissolute indulgence of sensual enjoyment, but an improvement. If we are to experience a genuine spiritual awakening, we must climb a virtual Jacob's ladder. We will attain the heights of revelation, paradoxically enough, by plumbing the very depth of our being. This gap between where we are, as Jacob, lie asleep to our divinity, and where we to awaken to it is bridged only through a rugged individual effort. The conclusion, as in the tale of Jacob, astonishes us with utter simplicity of the mystery of creation. Surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it. Genesis 28:16. The distance from spiritual causation to physical appearance has been traversed, and the gradations have been revealed as different altitudes of significance. The motion from cause to effect extends from depth to surface, a decrease in intensity or keenness of divine awareness, whereas the redemption of the being requires an opposite direction for increase of intensity. We ascend as we press deeper for the cause of appearance. The law of cause and effect, evolving as it does, the indivisible and the visible, necessarily shows the results of its operation as twofold. The individual's application of this law succeeds in producing outward evidence of this spiritual activity, visible conditions that are the perfect likeness of the images activated by his imagining. But his exercise of the imagination also affects the far greater reward of awakening and developing the experiencing faculty, which can expand and heighten spirituality faculty only by continued and dedicated use. While the being remains eternally one, each of its four quarters fulfills a distinct function as an available interpretation level for the individual at whatever degree he slumbers or wakes. Any idea that is spiritually felt as a conviction is morally impressed as an emotional sensation, psychologically understood as a mental concept, and literally evidenced as a physical appearance. Contrary to the widely accepted claim that the visualization of mental concepts is the procedure by which those concepts become manifested in visible appearances, I insist that such an effort is only a partial one. Whatever success has followed that purely mental activity is accounted for in the stirring of an impression sufficiently to reach actual feeling. The extent of this process is not having been consciously pursued by the one who reported success. Truly the manner in which the law of cause and effect operates is a science, but an artist is required to specially condition in order to achieve results with scientific precision. You are the potential artist, and artistry can be developed. Blake has said, "Without unceasing practice nothing can be done. Practice is art. If you leave off, you are lost." In harmony with Blake's stern warning to act, consider the parable of the prodigal son, which illustrates the frustration that accrues to one who spends, not his own substance, but another's. The decision to arise and go unto my Father, to ascend the interpretive levels to causation, brings the rejoicing over one who was dead and is alive. He was lost in helplessness and is found. Luke 15:32. The pitfalls. Ye have heard that it hath been said, an eye for an eye, and a tooth for a tooth. But I say, Matthew 5:38 and 39. In these words, refuting centuries of accepted protocol, had been spoken by your next-door neighbor. They might seem to indicate arrogant egocentricity. However, the position of spiritual independence they signify will be found essentially indispensable for anyone with a modicum of desire to know what he is talking about and where he is heading. The pride of intellect has long been ensconced prominently in the forefront with those earnest seekers for the way, and there has arisen an almost unearthly reverence for the opinions of the famous, the recognized, and the established. It has become something of a sin not to have read everything that has been published on the subject of creation by eminent writers, and not to agree without question with their every utterance for the sacrosanct reason that they said it. One of the most difficult lessons a sensitive individual is obliged to learn is to trust his own intuitive convictions, whether or not even one other person on earth may agree with him. Spiritual vision is its own authority, and the one who achieves it is never in a position of requiring approval for it. If one builds all his conclusion on the bedrock of his own experience, he will mature in confidence and dominion, and at the same time develop an immunity to the creeping paralysis of conformity to what they say. Spiritual independence is not to be confused with the complacency of self-satisfied arrogance. Spiritual independence is rooted in and evolved from spirit, and indicates an unrestrained reverence for its source, while arrogance, self-satisfaction, and complacency reveal an abysmal ignorance of spirit, an impudent claim of the surface appearance to be something in and of itself. Belief that one has arrived, when he discovered a mental depth beyond the physical appearance, is the gravest hazard to further development and success. The infinite, by its very nature, has no limits. Therefore, there could be no end to the individual's unfolding in its presence. To suppose the work is done when a desirable result has come into visible evidence is to misunderstand the nature of deliverance. Walt Whitman said, "Now understand me well. Out of every fruition of success, no matter what, comes forth something to make a new effort necessary. Beyond the contracted perspective lie undreamed of possibilities, which come within the scope of desirability as each new altitude is gained. After a child has applied the rules of simple addition to the examples which at the start must have seemed to him insurmountable, his inclination tends to one or two courses, either to stop right there in the assumption that he has done all that there is to do, or to continue repeating the same form over and over, exhibiting his skill in faster and yet faster execution. But sooner or later he discovers that the indulgence of his faculties in that simple mathematical endeavor has delivered him to a higher level, where he is confronted with what must appear to him a much larger ignorance because it concerns a higher problem. In much the same manner, students of metaphysical practice tend to believe that if they have learned the basic truth, all that is required from them now on is to keep asserting those fundamentals over and over again. This horizontal dimension of producing more and more of the same, only bigger and bigger, better and better, faster and faster, is no indication of development, but it is rather a shockingly naive advertisement of a limited degree of awakening. At the other extreme from arrogant complacency lies helpless dependence on the spiritual enlightenment and efforts of others, notwithstanding the scriptural assurance. God is faithful, and he will not let you be tempted beyond your strength. But with that temptation will also provide the way of escape, that you may be able to endure it. 1 Corinthians 10:13. A less poetic example might be phrased, no one faces algebraic equations in the third grade. Some harbor the mistaken notion that they are evincing humility and meekness when they demand assistance from someone else whom they assume to be more qualified to know the truth. There is a stunning rebuke to this practice set forth in the familiar parable of the 10 virgins, 5 of whom foolishly provided no oil for their lamps, and were sent to buy for those who engaged in selling. While they were gone, the bridegroom appeared, and the 5 who had made their own provisions entered into the marriage with him, to the wailing discontent of the foolish ones, against whom the door was shut. I would roughly paraphrase the symbolism of that parable in this manner. The virgins are those as yet undisciplined in the redemptive process of awakening the being. If wisdom characterizes their development, they dedicate their efforts to doing what they understand. But if they lack wisdom, are foolish, they provide no dedication or oil for their enlightenment. And when their opportunity to wed themselves to their ideal bridegroom presents itself, if they habitually depend on the efforts of others, go to them that sell, the door is shut against them. The meaning is transparent. The exercise of your own experiencing faculty opens the door to the wedding, while the failure to do so keeps it shut. The pledge of the spiritual vow, I do, must precede the consummation of your marriage to your ideal. Salvation of the being from its dream is an individual endeavor. It is only fair for you to understand, before embarking on this course of spiritual awakening, that you will encounter obstacles. Your enthusiasm is very likely to lag numberless times before your direction becomes adequately steady. Every time you abandon yourself to a conceivable state, desirable or otherwise, you sleep to your reality in a dream that you are the state. But this is the process of outgrowing or transcending the state, and its prize is the growth and awakening of the being. It is well to avoid talking about anything that does not imply your fulfilled ideal, for your habitual identification is the one that remains in evidence for you. If you have made progress, by all means acknowledge it, but do resist the impulse to keep those around you informed in regard to how far you have come. Reciting details of the outgrown condition can only animate its image for you again, and you have already heard the results of entertaining an image intensely enough to awaken its feeling in you. Endeavor to make your mental dialogues proceed from premises that imply your ideal as already an externalized condition. Above all, refuse steadfastly to indulge the conceivable mood of discouragement when you see no outward change in appearance after weeks of consecrated effort. Remember, the impersonal law of cause and effect is under compulsion to the being who motivates it, and it is obliged to sustain for you the visible evidence of your conviction. Your question, why has not the scene changed, is act from your conviction that nothing has changed. What evidence besides failure can the law provide you when your conviction of no change remains its only ingredient to work with? With these few precautions before your attention, venture forth into those most productive and stimulating of all activities, bearing in mind that your imagination is the divine being, that on its highest level of awareness designed the drama, and then abandoned himself to be the life of whatever you find yourself to be. If the ascent seems steep, remember, it is God which work within you, both to will and to do of his good pleasure. The triumph, ascension. God asleep is man, man awake is God. The being is one. All there is to the fall is a diminishing intensity of imagination until its divine nature becomes human, and conversely, all there is to the resurrection is a transformation of human nature through increased self-awareness until its divine nature is realized. As the individual experiences the metamorphosis of his nature from human to divine, he is personally fulfilling the ascension, the last of the 3 greatest Christian mysteries. Unlike the crucifixion and resurrection, which involve procedure, the ascension is not a process per se, but a product. Ascension is a fulfillment of original divine intent. This is the way Blake put it. God becomes as we are, that we may be as he is. The scriptural term, children of the resurrection, refers to the issue from the redemptive process of awakening the being from its dream. The pattern of that which is does not change. The being dies in its divinity to become the life of its conceptions, and this life awakens through interpretive levels to its divinity. If this idea of creation seems strange to you, read it in the more familiar words of Scripture. That which thou sowest is not quickened except it die. But God giveth a body as it hath pleased him, and to every seed his own body. It is sown a natural body, it is raised a spiritual body. And as we have borne the image of the earthly, we shall also bear the image of the heavenly. So when this corruptible shall have put on incorruption, and this mortal shall have put on immortality, then shall be brought to pass the saying that is written, Death is swallowed up in victory. 1 Corinthians. The earthly and the heavenly are not different species, but differing images we bear of those things which we interpret. Even death is discovered to be one of the eternally conceivable states, when the individual awakens from being its reality. This death, which is swallowed up in victory, is the second death spoken of in Revelation. Blessed and holy is he that hath part, that participates in the first resurrection. On such the second death hath no power. Revelations 26. Most certainly the role of dying from the drama of life has no power, because it is a dead death. The second death, the first death, is accomplished when the being dies to its divinity and abandons itself to be the living of the eternally dead play. During the dream, one has been accustomed to address the power as a thing apart, as that which brought me up also out of a horrible pit, out of the miry clay, and set my foot upon a rock, and established my going. Psalm 42. The very exercise of arousing the imagination prevents the individual from sleeping on in the grave of temporal physical selfhood as his identity, and through the process of resurrection, he matures the conviction of actually being the power itself. Completely out of the sphere of your survival, of the eternally conceivable states from which you awaken, above and beyond your continued growth, through the levels from which you interpret, your ascension is a purely spiritual triumph, an increase of intensity which transcends interpretation. Ascension is a totally new dimension for the awakened individual, signifying his release from the drama when its meaning has been fully and finally unfolded in him. When he is awakened from every imaginable state, he will say, I have finished the work which thou gavest me to do. And now, O Father, glorify thou me with thine own self, with the glory which I had with thee before the world was. John 17:4-5. This awakening through and beyond the contents of the drama effects your deliverance into what is called in St. Paul's letter to the Hebrews, the order of the Melchizedeks, an altogether different sphere of activity by the society of completely awakened humanity. Melchizedek is described as being without father, without mother, without descent, having neither being of days nor end of life. What else is it but the divine being? Just as you remain one, all the while giving multiple expression of yourself in the world as a man, a brother, a husband, a father, a citizen, an artist, a lawyer, a statesman, and so forth, even so, one Jehovah rises as the life of all. Its conception of itself, and in its totally awakened expression, compromises the Elohim and society of the gods, instead of many separate identities uniting to form one God. One God imagination expresses its living as the many. Our birth is but a sleep and a forgetting. The soul that rises with us, our life's star, hath had elsewhere its setting, and cometh from afar. Not in entire forgetfulness, and not in utter darkness, but trailing clouds of glory do we come, from God, who is our home. Wordsworth. End of Part 3, end of book. This audio presentation of I Do, a Spiritual Awakening Through Individual Endeavor by Freedom Barry, has been brought to you by audioenlightenment.com and has been recorded for the exclusive use of Audio Enlightenment members only. If you have received this audio from any website other than our own, please visit our website and let us know at your convenience.